start this show here, I guess.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started with our presentations here shortly. So if you want to grab a fresh drink, maybe grab a snack and grab a chair, we're going to get going with our introduction to our first presenter in about 2 minutes. Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, your host for Ideas on Tap, Dale Hopkins.
Good evening. That's pretty fun with the claps. I'm Dale Hopkins. Welcome to Vendasta. We'll start with a couple of things, just information for everybody here. The washrooms are on the left here. If you found them already, that's great. They're just right in the corners there. If you guys are looking for food and drinks, they're in the corner there. You still have a little bit of time before our first speaker gets on if you like. Also tonight, the drink tickets, the $2 drink tickets, those go to the Stars Air Ambulance. I'm supposed to, there we go, there's the helicopters. So that's the charity that all the funds raised go to that, so it's a little bit of fun, but it goes to a good cause. I wanted to welcome all of you to Vendasta today. And today our conversation is going to be about shift left. How many of you had heard of that before and knew what that meant? Maybe a show of hands. Okay, we got 5 or 6 people. That's good. A lot of people were asking why it was political. It has nothing to do with political parties. So just if you were worried about that or you came passionate, ready to debate, that's not what we're going to be talking about tonight. I think if you're going to think about what we're talking about tonight, I think it's about thinking about things a little bit earlier. And I think if you want to think about what shift left means, it could be a question. Let's picture, how many of you have ever purchased a house or designed a house? Show of hands. Anybody? We got quite a few people in the room. Now the question for you is, at what point should you involve your spouse? Is it after you've chosen the house? Or maybe you've done all the design work and you're totally committed to something, or is it maybe closer to the beginning of the project? For those of you that think it's at the end of the project, let's see a show of hands. These are the people that don't have their spouses here. So anyway, what we've got is, it's pretty obvious that what you do is other people that maybe have opinions that want to contribute that could potentially have important things that are easy to change at the beginning of a project. That's what shift left is all about. And so if we think about waterfall software development, as lots of us have heard of, one of the problems is that the developers aren't involved very early in the project. That tends to be one of those things. So we came up with modern agile. And then it turns out that in the agile software world, sometimes you should involve the ops people because it's not just important how we build it, it's important how we run it. And then we see DevOps come out, but it's still, there's another couple of parties that are left out of the party, and that's oftentimes, DevOps talks a lot about bringing test in, it talks a lot about bringing operations, but it kind of leaves the security people out. And so one of the last pieces is, could we maybe bring some security people in a bit earlier in the process? So that's really what the talks are going to be about tonight, and I'm sorry we don't have answers for when design should be brought in. Hint, it's probably early too. I got 2 other things I want to talk about. I got my slide thing here. We've got a couple events coming up as well. What we've got is on March 7th, there's a sales job fair. I don't know how many of you are here or into selling, but if you're here for the Dev Talk today and you're into selling, it's on March 7th. But the next Ideas on Tap is actually going to be about the tech industry, but the other side of it, which is going to be the non-tech jobs in the tech industry. And so that's going to be on March 27th, if you guys are interested in that one. And then another thing that's really exciting is, how many of you guys have heard of Cadence, workflow engine? So on the 23rd of April, the creators of Cadence, we've got Maxime and Samar. We're going to be bringing them into Saskatoon, and they're going to be offering workshops, and they're going to be offering question and answer. And basically, this is going to be open to the whole Saskatoon tech community. So if you're a developer, or if you know a developer that's interested in workflow coordination, this is going to be a great talk because these are the guys that created this. They've done a number of these tools before. And Cadence is an open source project from Uber, and these guys are forking that and building their own company. So you'll see that announced here very soon. And then right on the heels of that temporal, these guys are going to be here to talk all about that. So that'll be a fun event for anybody that's interested. So without any more delay, I want to introduce our first speaker. His is Dale Birch. He's an early member of our SRE team. People at Vendasta call him the big name in SRE. And he's from Ontario, but Northern Ontario. So that means he's into curling. He probably curls more than anybody. Well, the other thing to know about Dale is about a month ago he had a baby. So if Dale loses his place in the conversation today, it's because he's asleep. But he's getting there. He's coming out the other side. He's starting to figure it out. And so with that, I'll welcome Dale Birch.
Great. There we go. I'm not asleep now. Okay. So like Dale said, you wouldn't build a house without involving your wife. You probably also wouldn't have a whole bunch of architects build your house for you. At some point in the process, you probably want to involve an engineer that might determine what can actually be built versus what could potentially be built in there. So SecDevOps, same kind of thing. We want to shift left. We want to make sure that we are thinking about security early in the operations. That's going to allow us a number of ways we can accelerate and make things safer for everyone. So my overview of my talk, I want to talk about DevSecOps from the point of an SRE. So tech stack evolution. Things are changing in the way that we're serving applications and hosting them these days. Dev/ops balance. The security role within your organization and what you should be looking for there, as well as popular attack vectors, the way people are taking advantage of security in order to make some money, as well as focusing your energy. So let's kick this off. Tech stack. There was a time when you probably ran a bunch of Windows servers in a locked room behind a firewall. That was a single point of entry. You probably had a VPN in for anybody that was external to your network that needed to see what was going on in there. You controlled physical access to those servers, and all you really had to care about was make sure nothing got through your firewall. So that's completely changed these days with cloud-native architectures. So we're looking at things like microservices, where you have a web front end that contacts a number of microservices. These are tiny applications that are probably running in containers. They all own their own data storage, and they all serve a specific purpose. So the benefit of that is that you are spread out. You have a much tighter blast radius if you were to lose control of one of those microservices, but you also have a lot more of them. So you have to think about security at a different level. So if we look at cloud native, this is where things are going with the way things are hosted now. There are 5 principles that make something cloud native. That would be on-demand self-service, so I don't have to call somebody and order new servers in order to get greater capacity. I can provision that at my fingertips at any time. Broad network access, I'm not hiding things behind a VPN or some type of a firewall in order to gain access. You can access these things globally. You can access them from anywhere in the world, and you can perform your job from anywhere. Resource pooling. You are probably sharing resources at some level in here. Some piece of multi-tenancy is a key part of being cloud native. This allows you to share resources. You can have one service spike, but it's coming out of a pool of resources so that you're able to cut down costs. You're able to be more elastic with any given service. Rapid elasticity, so any one service can actually grow as needed to handle traffic. Your entire serving architecture should be able to grow to handle traffic. This could be things like Black Friday, this could be things like spikes in traffic, migrations, bringing on new customers. That's a core tenet of being cloud native, is your ability to adapt to those situations from the business and respond as needed. Measured service as well. So you usually pay for what you actually consume in cloud services. So that is the tenant that you're going to actually pay for just the pieces you consume. That also means that as you get more traffic, you're actually going to pay more money. So the ability to scale is probably tied to your ability to pay. So let's look at some tech stack changes. If you were to look at the CNCF survey from this year, 73% of surveys respondents said they are running containers in production today. That means that 73% have some type of a workload that's being served out of a container. They're not running on legacy servers that are using a host operating system running some workload in there. This means that where you focus your energy for security has shifted from being at the operating system level and at the physical network level into your application level, because you're just shipping binaries there. They probably don't even have a command line that you can actually access or take advantage of. Within that tech stack, the average length of time a container runs for is about 5 days. So even if you gain access to a container in order to try and exploit it in some way, you're probably not going to have that access for very long. It's going to go away, and you're going to have to figure out a new way to get in there. So you have to consider what type of attacks happen when you don't have that access to gain and that you can keep for a long period of time. Things are going to shift over faster, and you have to reconsider what's going on there. So let's look at DevOps a little bit. As Dale mentioned on the intro, DevOps is the combination of your development and your operations resources. They are able to feed off each other and create a system that actually grows faster, scales, and is more performant. So you have both the planning, the development, your build, your test, your releasing, deploying, operating, and monitoring, and the results from those feed back into your planning again. So the pain that your operations side in the green there feels actually goes into the planning for your next cycle in here. What that does is make sure that something like a monitoring pane where you can't see what's going on or manage your traffic actually gets compensated for with the next set of features that you're going to build out for your application. This is going to take your plan and make sure that you've got monitoring built into it as you go. This is going to make things like operations where you need to do bulk work is going to get taken care of when you're planning your feature for how to do that. So what is the difference between DevOps and SecDevOps? Well, it's really the same diagram, but with security in it as well. So we look at the same thing. As we're doing planning, this probably means that you bring a security person into the meeting with you that can say things like, hey guys, you probably don't want email as your primary key for this database. That's a bad idea. That becomes a piece of private information that we need to secure down the road. You probably want to have some type of an ID as your primary key, make this thing scalable long term. When you think about what ports you're going to be opening, you can have that done while you're writing your software in there so that you can secure those things. When you look at what type of auth you bring in, you can take care of that in the plan and the development stage early on, and it's going to be much more secure long term. You're not going to have to worry about that. As you start to get into the release and deploy cycle, your security team's then going to be taking care of things like automated scanning within your production applications, checking for vulnerabilities as you're building your containers, and being able to make that monitor and operate feedback into your next cycle. You find a problem, you address it next time you go through a release cycle. Having security involved with your dev and ops is actually going to let everybody move faster, because you're not going to have some guy in the corner saying like, hey guys, you need to stop your operation so that you can go fix my security holes. So following up on that, what role should security fit in your organization? It used to be you'd have some grumpy guy that would be like, you need a 35-character password, and it needs to have a whole bunch of asterisks and capitals, and you need to change it every 6 days, and you can't write it down on your desk, and why don't you just memorize this shit? So we don't want that. What you want is you want a security person that's actually going to be contributing to the velocity of your organization. These should be influencers. These should be the people that are able to do training. They're able to pass on their knowledge to the rest of the team that's around them so that they're able to actually bring up the level of the entire team. When a security person leaves the team's able to continue to fill that skill set as they develop new features in there. So what you look for in security in an organization is going to be your influencers that are going to take over that role. They're going to do heavy amounts of teaching. They're going to show the organization the better path and the lower cost by actually getting involved early and changing the way you develop its software, not standing at the end as a gate. So let's look at some of the attacks that happen. So it used to be that people just wanted your data. Your data was valuable. Now your data is valuable to you. People want money. That's why they're doing these hacking activities or trying to take advantage of it, or they want certain pieces of information that they can convert into money later. So ransomware attacks, very popular. This is one that Life Labs had recently, December 17th. They lock you out of your system and say basically all your customers are going to be offline until you pay us. That gives an organization a lot of motivation to actually pay money and gain access to their information again. This type of attack is very common. It typically requires access to some type of a piece of data and the ability to change it. So you really want to take a look at your access control mechanisms and make sure that if somebody gets access, it's to a subset of data that is not valuable and they don't have the ability to actually change that data in order to block you out. Cryptojacking. So, like I said, your actual data isn't as valuable as it once was. So another way you can take advantage of cloud resources is actually to steal them to do something else. In this case, mine cryptocurrency. So this is an example where Tesla had a control panel for their Kubernetes cluster open to the internet. So the Kubernetes cluster has a ton of resources available to it for performing compute activities. So by having that open on the internet, they're able to take control and deploy their own workload into their environment and then use those resources to actually mine untraceable currency. This allows you to get money quickly without actually having anything but access to resources. Another vulnerability they had here by having this open was the ability to just click on that little icon where it's yellow and show you the keys to their cloud storage bucket. This lost them all of their telemetry information at the time that was stored in AWS. So two factors here. This is a screen that Kubernetes surfaces and should be locked down and only within your own private network where it's secure, but you give developers access to control these things and control access to them. They just put it on the internet. It was one of thousands like this. They were taken advantage of quite broadly, so actually this screen is no longer shipped with Kubernetes because it is such a big security risk. Another common attack is license exploitation. So there are actually over 200 licenses for open source software. They call them copyleft licenses. So if you install software into your application, a library that does some piece of functionality, and don't check what the license is with that, they could actually force you to release your private software publicly. They could do that through a lawsuit, sue you for access to that code, and it could force you to actually publish your private software. So license exploitation is another risk that as part of your deployment pipeline, you should be checking to see any new software installed or libraries installed have a license that you agree with, that you will follow the terms of. Because there are so many of them, understanding the terms and services of the licenses that you're installing is important to make sure that you're protected from that risk. Another one is social engineering. This article is from 2 days ago where one of the Shark Tank hosts lost almost $400,000 in a spear phishing campaign, where they took information that they knew about the business, information about deals that they knew were going on in the real estate world, and then they sent targeted emails to them saying that, hey, we need you to change your banking information and send the money over here. Another common one that we saw here in Saskatoon was the city losing $1 million to a similar scam, where they picked up the phone and said, hey, you should change the bank account information for this. It's a lot easier to convince people to give up their security than it is to actually hack into a container with a new zero-day vulnerability. So these are the spots that you really have to watch in order to cover your butt security-wise. Changing targets. This is a graphic from KPMG in the United States that they're saying healthcare information is 10 times more valuable than credit cards or social security information. Typically, you'd think of credit cards or social security information as being like really the gold. You can fake IDs, you can do these things. But actually, healthcare information is worth more now on the black market. And the reason is it's really hard to change after the fact. There is a ton of insurance claims go on in the United States at any time. Being able to fraudulently slip some claims in there with your insurance information is actually quite valuable and will pay off quickly. You can obtain things like illicit drugs because you've got prescription information and those things in there. You also have the ability to blackmail people. So healthcare information, if you're storing any of that, it is a high-risk target that you should be considering protecting. Same with credit card information. That's why you should offload those whenever possible to third-party processors. So supply chain attacks. This is another common way to shift left. Like we as developers are trying to get involved with security earlier in the cycle, so is the ability to hack into your applications. By shifting left, they're able to actually get malicious code into your repos and then have you deploy that for it. They don't actually have to hack in afterwards. It's a lot easier to compromise GitHub or compromise a developer's credentials and get those into your deploy chain. So this was an example where an NPM library that was downloaded 2 million times a week actually had somebody take over ownership of it, commit code that would do crypto mining, and then people that pulled that library and installed it were actually doing crypto mining for them. This is a risk that you're going to have with almost any public package. The ways you're going to secure this are looking at signing your commits from your developers, actually securing your build chain, and only running commits that have been signed on your production environment. That's a good start. You also need to audit what you're actually installing for third-party libraries and making sure that those are trusted and secured. NPM's doing a ton of work to try and make this locked down, but it is still a big risk with installing third-party libraries. So I think the biggest takeaway you can take from this is to focus your energy. This is a quote from the FTC. That's the organization in the States that will often level fines for security vulnerabilities and violations. They say that companies that consider security from the start assess their options and make reasonable choices based on the nature of their business. So based on the sensitivity of your data and the type of business you're doing, you make choices around how much security you should invest. Threats to data may transform over time, but the fundamentals of security remain constant. So if you took the care to build security in from day one on an application and the way you built that application, chances are, even as that continues to grow and run, you're going to have a lower operations cost and you're going to have lower risk with that. Are there any questions? Awesome. I'll hand it back over to Dale. Thank you.
There we go. Perfect. So anyways, thank you very much, Dale, for the talk. We've got a little bit of time here. We're going to get you guys a chance to get another drink, chat with some other people if you had some thoughts about that. I think it's really interesting in this concept of shifting left and doing things a bit early, making it easier. One of the, again, coming back to our house example, you can imagine that if you lived in a tropical place and you built a house that didn't have any doors, and then at the end you decided you wanted to add security to that, it's a really difficult proposition to add security to a house that doesn't have any doors. And it's the same sort of idea with software. When you consider things late, it can actually be nearly impossible to do or prohibitively expensive. Awesome. So then at 5:30, we've got our next talk. It's coming from Nick. I'm excited to introduce him. So if you can make your way back here for just before 5:30. Thank you.
ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started up here again in a few minutes. So it's a perfect time to refresh that drink or visit the bathrooms. Grab a munchie. We're going to get started here with our next presenter in just a few minutes.
All right, everybody, if I can get you to take a seat. We've got our last speaker of the evening. I'll just give you guys a quick little rundown reminder. If you guys are looking for the washrooms and you weren't here when I first announced, they're on the far left here, by the exit, by the elevator. Ask for directions, we'll find you. We've got food and refreshments over in the corner, but if you guys could take a seat, we've got Nick James coming up. Nick James has been working at Yardi Systems forever, but he's been 2 years as a dedicated security role. He is a DJ, actually retired. He has a bit of an ops background. He was born in Peterborough, which is southern Ontario, but in his professional life, he tries to live a boring life, which means no security issues. Why don't we welcome Nick?
Howdy. So I was a little surprised that they asked me to talk here because my background is human element security, meaning when Dale was talking about the fact that it's easier to get somebody to tell you that their password than it is to crack their password, I try and stop that type of thing. So I try and stop the phishing emails. I try and create policies so that, certain organization can't ship $1.4 million to a scammer, that type of thing. So I tried to find a way to integrate humans are stupid, which is the thesis of everything that I do, into DevSecOps. So we're going to talk about the culture and the people element of it, but I couldn't come up with a witty subtitle, so just pretend there's one there. So I'm a security analyst at Yardi, kind of a catch-all title for everything. As you're probably well aware, we can't legally call ourselves security engineers or security architects in Canada, so it is what it is. nickjames.ca, nick@nickjames.ca if you ever want to get in touch with me. But first, cats, because this is a tech presentation. These are my two babies. I was told I had to put them in my slideshow or I'd be in trouble. So, up until recently, project managers and development teams have been using two textbooks, or at least I assume they've been using these two textbooks just from what I've seen. The developers have been using this one, getting around to security next month, if there's time. And the project managers have been using this one, which is what the fuck is security, how to ignore it, and deliver your project. So this is what we're trying to combat, right? Like, this is the problem, is security gets pushed down the road, and then we might never even get around to it at all. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to move security earlier in the process. Now, they've already kind of covered what is DevOps, but I didn't know how early in the evening I was going to be speaking, so I put a little slide here anyway. So we're trying to create security as code, culture with ongoing flexible collaboration between release engineers and security teams. A lot of people, when we talk DevSecOps or DevOps, they think this is companies saving money. We're going to make Paul responsible for dev and ops, and now Paul's goal. I Googled, this is just three little bullet points summarizing that, right? So we're trying to create shared ownership of security, do it earlier in the lifecycle. I Googled how to implement DevSecOps, and this was in the little Google Smart Result thing, using Agile, running automated tests, but the problem is that step one is missing, and step one is cultural change within your company, right? So I want to give you a little bit of perspective. Here's a quote. Security is a roadblock to agility and speed of application development. I think a lot of developers in the room would agree with that statement. I actually took another statement and reversed it, which was agility and speed of development is a roadblock to implementing good application security, which is what a whole bunch of security professionals at the RSA conference said when they were polled. So we have developers who think that security is just a bunch of grumpy assholes that say no to everything. And then we have a bunch of security people that think developers are a bunch of toddlers who are just poking holes in things and letting all the bad guys into our infrastructure. And the whole idea is that we need to come together and we need to work together. Yeah, I am the asshole that told you that you need to have a 15-character password. But you know what? I also have a 15-character password. The difference is that I understand why it needs to be 15 characters, and we do a really bad job of conveying to the admin assistant why their password is so fucking long. And we need to do better, right? So everyone needs an ownership stake in security, not just responsibility, ownership. So the developers, the operations people, everyone in your organization needs to take security seriously, and they need to want to take security seriously. You need to show them the value proposition, right? You don't want to be the next target on the news. You don't want to be the next city of Saskatoon, because I'm going to talk about you at bar camp if you are. Everybody in the company has a stake in security, right? Development and operations require security training. It's the truth. When I talk to developers, they have the best intentions. They're like, oh, you know, we want people to be able to reset passwords, but it's complicated to like have this thing where we send them a link and it does this thing. What if we just email them their current password, right? Like best intentions, but that's not very secure. And so we do a shit job of teaching security and secure coding practices at the U of S, at Sask Poly, and at other places. Thankfully, the U of S now has a security research chair. Not sure if you're aware of that, but they're starting to introduce some security. But up until now, we've done a shit job. So security training, getting people into that security mindset needs to be part of the shift. You can't just say, hey, developers, put some security tests into your integration lifecycle. We're DevSecOps compliant. No. You need to actually teach people how to be secure, what kind of tests they should be running, why they're running them. When he was talking about insecure packages, how would you know the package is insecure? Like, what are you looking for? At the same time, you're not trying to turn your developers into security professionals. As I said, I would like some job security, so we still would like to exist. But you need to teach them so that when developers and security sit down at the table, they're having a conversation with mutual understanding, right? Security teams require some DevOps training. So this goes both ways. Like, I'm not here just to say developers are bad. Security, we have our weaknesses as well. Half the time I go into a meeting and there's some new buzzword and I don't know what the hell it means. Yeah, I know what Agile is, I know what Scrum is, whatever. But you know, there's some new technology, we're using whatever, we're doing this new methodology that we found. We have a stand-up and we go to this weird tool and it tells us all this shit. Don't fucking know, right? And I can't help you secure your stuff. We can't have a conversation about working security into your development lifecycle until developers understand what the hell you're doing. Because you guys, to be fair, move a hell of a lot faster than security. And as he said, I'm from an ops background, and even still, developers are moving faster than ops, right? I'm not saying, again, that you need to turn your security people into developers. That's not the goal. The goal is that both parties at the table can communicate in the same language and understand what each other are saying. The biggest shift is to one of collaboration and mutual understanding. So this is kind of the last actual jump-off slide, so I'm going to put the thing down. The point is, when you are having your planning discussion, when you are having your design discussion, bring security into the conversation. Because it's a lot easier for security to go, maybe that's not a great idea, and to change the plan, than it is to have this release-ready piece of code and have security go, what are you doing? Well, it's maybe not the greatest idea, because that actually slows you down further, right? I'm going to tangent here, because that's what I do, and that's why they asked me to talk, because I'm a ranter. My main specialty is email security, right? So when it gets to the technical side, what I do is email security. Inbound and outbound, best practices, don't get caught up in people's spam filters. My biggest pet peeve is signing up for some website and it telling me to check for the registration email in my junk folder. That means that their team doesn't know what the fuck they're doing with email, right? If Yardy's registration and password reset emails end up in your junk folder, I did my job wrong. So outbound and inbound security. Developers are shit at implementing email correctly, right? So half the time, one of our mail clusters ends up on some spam filter, and now not only do I have to fix that problem, I have to go to the dev team and tell them what they did wrong and tell them how to fix it. But if when they were implementing that little tiny piece of the application, the notifications, the password reset emails, if they involved someone who knew about email, that problem would never surface in the first place, right? But instead, now, I'm wasting my time having a conversation with project managers and VPs and whatever to get this shit prioritized so that we can fix how email is being done. And think about how minuscule a component of the average application that email is. And yet I'm wasting my time, VP time, project manager time, developer time to fix this problem. Now think about vulnerabilities. Think about database security, think about, oh shit, we're storing reversible encryption for passwords, we're storing credit cards in the clear, or whatever. That's even bigger, that's even longer, it's an even harder conversation. Whereas if that shit just doesn't happen in the first place, things are a lot easier. Now, I read a quote while I was searching around for DevSecOps stuff the other day, where it was security needs to adjust to the developers in a DevSecOps environment to make sure that they don't become a roadblock to developers. Obviously written by a developer. We need to adjust to each other, right? Security needs to bend a little bit. We can't just be, no, you can't do that. There are delivery dates, there are value propositions, there are stakeholders, there's whatever. We can't just be, standing in front of your release. But at the same time, dev needs to bend a little bit to security when we say, hey, maybe we could store that, one-way encryption instead, right? That's the main proposition with DevSecOps. Yeah, automation, tooling, whatever, it's important, and that's what you're working towards. But if everyone isn't thinking about security, if the security team and the developers are not working together, if the security team is not in the planning meetings, it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't. Because developers are not security experts. Security are not developer experts or development experts. But if you get them into a room together and they can work collaboratively, you will ship a secure product. And trust me, the amount of money you will lose from shipping a release half a day later than you intended because you had to do something security wanted is a lot less than the money you will lose paying legal fees if you have a vulnerability that leads to some sort of breach, or the amount of money that you will pay in lost reputation if you become the next Target or the next Equifax or the next Life Labs or whoever. That little bit of extra time that you take to work with security and make sure that you ship a secure product is adding value to the product. We always talk about ops and security are loss leaders, right? They don't generate value for your product. But if you're shipping a cloud product, your ops people make it fast. People want fast things. They are adding value to the whole thing. Your salespeople can go, hey, our shit's fast. That's thanks to your ops people. The VPs that think security and ops and whoever are not adding value to the product don't understand what all of these teams do collaboratively together, and that's a problem. That, in a nutshell, is my thesis, right? Is that it is about working together, it is about changing culture, and then it is about introducing security tests and automation and tooling and automatic vulnerability scanning and all of that fun stuff. First, you need buy-in from everyone that security is important. And trust me, security is important because it is everybody's responsibility. And that's it. That is the crux of my conversation, nice and short and to the point. Any questions or comments? I can rant about a million things all day if we want. Oh.
I've got one back here. Between like frustration and satisfaction, what do you find security is on that scale of like being annoyed with what people are doing and not doing security, or being like, yes, you're actually doing things that I wanted you to do? Where does that land?
So when I get up here and I get up at bar camp, I rant a lot because it's entertaining. But it's not all about losses and people being silly. There are a lot of wins in security as well. I mean, I'm under a non-disclosure agreement. I can't talk about super specifics. But some of our newer products that are, adopting newer methodologies because they're being spun up from the ground, it's surprising to me some of the stuff the developers come and they're like, we want to implement this thing, and in your brain you're going, shit, this, fuck. But then they propose the security solution to doing it safely, and you go, holy crap, that's actually better than what I was going to propose, because I was just going to say, no, you can't do this. So I do have wins. There are a lot of wins in security, but there are a lot of elements too where, and this is true in ops and it's true in development as well, because I mean, let's be fair, no matter what industry you're in, your users are the ones that give you the headache at the end of the day. There are a lot of moments where it's like, oh shit, like, why would you do this, right? I think it's a fair balance though, I rant up here because it's entertaining, but it's not all bad. Any other questions? Sure.
Okay. I had a question about the, you were talking about when you see, check your junk filter for our password reset or what have you. I'm a developer, so I don't know how to write good emails. What are some of the common things that, like, what causes it specifically to go into the junk filter or whatever? I'm interested in that.
So, I mean, that's a deep and complicated conversation, but I'll try and answer. In essence, there are a number of things that need to be done on the operations side before you even start to send the email, right? Your email servers need to be configured correctly. The way the internet works these days, you need reverse DNS on your email server so that it resolves both ways, IP to address, address to IP. It's called full circle, or what is it? No. Forward confirmed reverse DNS. SPF, DMARC, DKIM for authentication, all that fun stuff. But then when you actually get into writing the email, you need to consider the wording of it. You need to consider the whole days of, like, my email is just one image that loads. Those are gone. You can't send that kind of shit anymore. Loading images from a whole bunch of weird different servers into an email is not good either. So, like, if you've got your logo coming from your company site and you've got this image coming from some CDN, bad. If you are sending emails that do not have unsubscribe links, bad. If you're sending emails that do not mark themselves as I am bulk, bad. The thing that I tell people is if you send shit email to people and they can't easily unsubscribe, what they're going to do is hit mark as junk, right? And the more people that do that, the filter of whatever email platform that is learns, hey, shit from this company is consistently marked as junk, even if they opted into it, even if it's legitimate. People just don't want to see it, and they don't have an easy way to stop it from coming. And then that harms you in the long run, right? So it's not one thing you can do better. It's a lot of things. One of the ones that a lot of dev teams struggle with as well is not purging email lists. So people sign up for your product, and their address is in your database for fucking ever. And that is a problem. So what happens is I have an email address, nick@nickjames.ca. 10 years down the road, I don't care about my website anymore, I let it expire. Sorbs, a blacklist, buys my domain. They set up a honeypot on my domain. You send an email to me because I've been in your database for 15 years, you're on Sorbs' blacklist now. It happens all the fucking time to companies because they don't purge their mailing list. And Sorbs' whole thing is, you send an email to us, you're a spammer. Doesn't matter what it says, doesn't matter what's in it, you're a spammer. And their thinking is, you should not be maintaining addresses that long. So they give you like 2 years where you reasonably shouldn't be sending shit to this. Yeah, there's a million things you can fuck up with email, which is why I am employed, thankfully.
I knew the up to sort of the DKIM and the SPF level, but the content, was what I was really interested in. Thank you.
For those of you who are in marketing and development, Google does have a guidelines for bulk senders. If you just Google guidelines for bulk senders, it's Gmail's guidelines, and they're pretty much what the industry follows. Yeah.
All right, I'm bought in. From both yours and Dale's talk, I am convinced to pull in my security team earlier on in the process and get you guys involved. What if I don't have a security team?
So that's a question, right? Yardi didn't actually have a security team until a couple of years ago, and Yardi's been around for 25 years. Like, I'm not here to shame anyone for not having a security team. You need to decide if it's worth it to your business to have a security team, and I would argue that it is, because I'm in that industry. But at the same time, if you have a couple ops people and you have a couple developers who have the skills and the drive and the interest in doing it, and you can actually give them the time to do it, that's acceptable at a certain level as well, right? There is that thing where it's like, oh, hey, Bob can do this, but we're going to give Bob an hour a week. That's not enough. But if you're willing to give, some SRE or some systems admin or whatever the time to do it, I think that's okay. Yeah, at the same time, hire security people because I want to be employed. So I'm going to keep harping that. I was told that transitioning to security was job security, so I need to maintain that. Any other questions? I'm always happy to talk any security subject. Ping me, email me, whatever, and I appreciate you listening to me ramble on.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
So that concludes the formal part of our program tonight. What we do have is one last thing, which is for those of you that purchase tickets in the 50-50, we are going to come up in 10 minutes and we are going to draw for the 50-50. So you have one last chance if you want to buy any. And again, I think you'll find Katrina at the front door with that. So anyway, thank you very much for coming out. Feel free to sit and chat. And again, we've still got beverages and we've still got food. So thank you very much. We'll come back in 10.